The auditorium fell silent the moment. Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked through the microphone like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I sat in the third row, cap balanced perfectly on my freshly curled hair, hands folded in my lap the way my grandmother taught me. The burgundy gown felt heavy against my shoulders, heavier than it should have been for polyester and pride. "Some people don't deserve this honor," she said, her gray eyes scanning the sea of graduates before landing on me with the precision of a sniper. "But rules are rules, and we must follow them." The pause stretched like a held breath. 200 families shifted in their metal chairs. My mother's hand found my father's arm in the audience behind me. I could feel their confusion radiating toward the stage-like heat from summer pavement. "Sarah, Elizabeth Chun." My name hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain, a handful of claps that died quickly in the vast space. I stood on legs that felt borrowed from someone else, someone braver, someone who belonged here. The walk to the stage stretched endlessly, each step echoing in the silence that Mrs. Henderson had carved from what should have been my moment of triumph. She held the diploma between us like a barrier, her fingers gripping the leather folder so tightly her knuckles had gone white. For 6 years, she had been my English teacher, my mentor, the woman who had encouraged me to write, to dream, to reach for scholarships that seemed impossible for a girl whose parents cleaned office buildings at night. "Congratulations," she whispered as I reached for my diploma, but the word came out like an apology she didn't mean to make. I took the folder from her hands, our fingers brushing for just a moment. Hers were cold as winter stones. Mine were trembling, but I hoped she couldn't tell. The photographer's flash went off, capturing what would become the most painful smile I had ever worn. Walking back to my seat, I felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes following me. Some curious, some pitying, some angry on my behalf. But Mrs. Henderson's words had already done their work, turning my valedictorian honor into something that felt stolen, unearned, shameful. I sat down and placed the diploma in my lap, staring at the gold seal that suddenly seemed tarnished. Around me, the ceremony continued. Other names were called, other students walked across the stage to genuine applause, to words of congratulation that weren't laced with poison. But I had stopped listening. In my mind, I was already somewhere else, somewhere far from this auditorium, where my achievement had been turned into a question mark, where 6 years of perfect grades and sleepless nights had been reduced to charity, to rules that had to be followed rather than honor that had been earned. The diploma felt like evidence of a crime I didn't know I had committed. Principal Martinez continued reading names, his voice steady and warm for each graduate. Jennifer Morrison, magna cum laude. The applause was thunderous, genuine, filled with the kind of celebration that should have been mine. Jennifer walked across the stage with confidence, her blonde hair catching the stage lights, her smile radiant and unquestioned. I watched her receive her diploma, watched Mrs. Henderson's face transform into genuine pride as she shook Jennifer's hand. No hesitation, no whispered apologies, no cold fingers or reluctant congratulations. Just pure, uncomplicated joy for a student's achievement. The contrast was devastating. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing become shallow. The burgundy gown that had felt heavy before now felt suffocating, the cap on my head like a crown I had no right to wear. My parents' faces swam in my peripheral vision, their confusion and hurt palpable even from 3 rows away. When the ceremony ended, when the caps were thrown into the air in the traditional celebration, mine felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I watched it fall back down, catching it with hands that no longer felt steady. The other graduates were laughing, crying, embracing. I stood alone in the middle of the chaos, holding my diploma and my cap, feeling like an imposter at my own graduation. Mrs. Henderson had disappeared from the stage, vanishing into the crowd of faculty and administrators. I wanted to find her, to demand an explanation, to understand what I had done wrong. But my legs wouldn't move. My voice had disappeared, somewhere between her accusation and my name being called. The auditorium began to empty, families flowing toward, the exits like water finding its way downhill. My parents approached slowly, carefully, as if I might break if they moved too quickly. My mother's eyes were red with unshed tears. My father's jaw was set in a way that meant he was fighting to control his anger. Mia, my mother whispered, using the Spanish endearment she saved for moments when English felt inadequate. What was that about? I couldn't answer. The words were trapped somewhere between my throat and my heart, too heavy to lift, too sharp to swallow. How could I explain that? My English teacher, my mentor, the woman who had shaped my love of literature and writing, had just publicly questioned my worthiness in front of everyone who mattered to me. "She's jealous," my father said finally, his voice carrying the weight of every slight he had endured in his 43 years in this country. Some people can't stand to see others succeed, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Mrs. Henderson wasn't jealous. She was something worse, disappointed. In me, in herself, in whatever she thought she had discovered that made my success feel fraudulent to her. The crowd continued to thin around us, leaving behind the detritus of celebration, programs scattered on the floor, forgotten flowers, the echo of joy that no longer included me. I stood there in my burgundy gown, holding my diploma like a piece of evidence in a trial I didn't understand, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my 18 years of life. The reception afterward was a minefield of forced smiles and careful conversations. I stood by the punch bowl, still wearing my cap and gown, watching families cluster around their graduates like protective shields. The gymnasium had been transformed with balloons and streamers, tables laden with cookies and coffee. But the festive atmosphere felt hollow, like a party I was no longer invited to attend. My parents flanked me like bodyguards, their presence both comforting and suffocating. My mother kept smoothing my hair, a nervous habit that intensified when she was upset. My father stood with his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for threats. They were trying to protect me from something they didn't understand, and their helplessness was almost as painful as Mrs. Henderson's words. Sarah, Mrs. Patterson, my calculus teacher, approached with a genuine smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. "Congratulations, dear. You've earned every bit of this honor." The kindness in her voice almost broke me. I managed to thank you, but the words came out cracked and small. She squeezed my shoulder gently before moving on, leaving me with the first validation I had received all evening. But her words only highlighted the absence of others. Teachers who had known me for years walked past with careful nods, their eyes avoiding mine. Some looked embarrassed, others confused, a few angry on my behalf. But none of them approached. None of them offered explanations or contradictions to what Mrs. Henderson had implied. Jennifer Morrison stood across the room, surrounded by family and friends, her laughter bright and Her mother, a woman I had met at various school functions over the years, caught my eye and looked away quickly, her expression unreadable. There was something in that glance, something that made my stomach twist with a new kind of understanding. "Let's go home," my father said quietly, his hand on my shoulder. "You don't need to stay here." But I couldn't move. Despite the pain, despite the humiliation, I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to find Mrs. Henderson, to demand an explanation, to make sense of the moment that had turned my greatest achievement into my deepest shame. I found her in the hallway outside the gymnasium, standing alone by the trophy case that displayed decades of Lincoln High's academic achievements. She was staring at the plaque that would soon bear my name as valedictorian, her face a mask of emotions I couldn't read. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Guilt. Deep, consuming guilt that seemed to age her before my eyes. "Sarah," she said, my name coming out like a prayer or a curse. Why? The word escaped before I could stop it, raw and desperate. What did I do wrong? She looked around the empty hallway, as if checking for witnesses to our conversation. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said finally. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Because everyone in that auditorium heard you say, "I don't deserve this honor." Her face crumpled slightly, the mask slipping to reveal the pain beneath. "It's complicated, Sarah. There are things you don't understand, pressures that then explain them to me." I interrupted, my voice growing stronger with desperation. "Help me understand why the teacher who encouraged me to apply for scholarships, who told me I had a gift for writing, who made me believe I could succeed, why that teacher just humiliated me in front of my entire family." Mrs. Henderson's hands trembled as she reached into her purse, pulling out a tissue that she twisted between her fingers. "I can't," she whispered. "Not here, not now. But Sarah, you have to believe you earned this. Every grade, every honor, every opportunity ahead of you. You earned it all." "Then why?" "Because sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "And sometimes protecting someone means hurting them first." Before I could respond, she walked away, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor like a countdown to something I couldn't name. I stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by the ghosts of achievements past, feeling more confused than ever. The drive home was silent except for the soft sound of my mother crying in the passenger seat. She tried to hide it, turning her face toward the window, but I could see her shoulders shaking. My father's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tightly I worried he might break his teeth. We lived in a small house on the east side of town where the lawns were brown more often than green, and the cars in the driveways had seen better decades. It was a neighborhood of dreams deferred and hopes held onto with desperate fingers. My parents had moved here when I was 5, drawn by the promise of good schools and safe streets. They had sacrificed everything for my education, working double shifts and skipping meals to pay for tutoring and test prep. At home, my grandmother was waiting in her favorite chair, the one by the window where she could watch the street and keep track of the neighborhood's comings and goings. She had emigrated here 50 years ago with nothing but determination and a suitcase held together with hope. Education was sacred to her, the key to everything America had promised. "Show me," she said simply, extending her weathered hands toward the diploma. I placed it in her lap and watched her trace the gold lettering with one finger, her lips moving silently as she read the words that declared me valedictorian of Lincoln High School's class of 2024. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "This is yours," she said firmly in her accented English. "No one can take this from you." But as I climbed the stairs to my room, I wondered if that was true. Mrs. Henderson's words had already taken something from me, not the achievement itself, but the joy of it, the pure satisfaction of a goal reached and a dream realized. Instead of celebrating, I found myself questioning everything: my grades, my essays, my right to the scholarship that would take me to Stanford in the fall. My room was exactly as I had left it that morning, neat, organized, the walls covered with acceptance letters and scholarship notifications that had once filled me with pride. Now they felt like accusations, evidence of a fraud I was only beginning to understand. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, staring at the blank document that appeared on the screen. For 6 years, writing had been my escape, my way of making sense of the world and my place in it. But tonight, the words wouldn't come. The cursor blinked at me like an accusation, waiting for explanations I didn't have. Outside my window, the sun was setting behind the row of identical houses, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of better days. Days when Mrs. Henderson had stayed after school to help me with my college essays. When she had told me I had a gift for language that could take me anywhere I wanted to go. Now I wondered if she had been lying then, or if something had changed, something that made her see my success as undeserved, my honor as a mistake that rules forced her to acknowledge. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the messages that had been accumulating all evening. Congratulations from classmates, pride from extended family, excitement from friends who were heading to college in the fall. But reading them now felt like looking at messages meant for someone else, someone who deserved the praise they contained. The silence in my room felt heavy, pregnant with questions I was afraid to ask, and answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's words in the hallway. Sometimes protecting someone means hurting them first. What could she possibly be protecting me from? And why did that protection require destroying the moment I had worked 6 years to achieve? I closed my laptop without writing a single word and lay down on my bed, still wearing my graduation gown. The fabric rustled with every movement, a constant reminder of the day that should have been perfect but had instead become a wound I didn't know how to heal. Sleep came eventually, but it was filled with dreams of stages and microphones, of words that cut like knives and applause that sounded like judgment. In my dreams, I walked across that stage again and again, but each time, Mrs. Henderson's words grew louder, more cutting, until they drowned out everything else. 3 days passed before I found the courage to return to school. The building felt different in summer's emptiness hallways that had buzzed with teenage energy, now echoed with the hollow sound of my footsteps on polished linoleum. I had come to clean out my locker, to collect the last remnants of my high school life before moving forward into whatever came next. The combination still worked, 17 minus 23 minus 8. Inside, I found the usual debris of senior year-old tests. Dried out pens, a sweater I had forgotten about in March. But tucked behind my calculus textbook was something I didn't remember putting there. A manila envelope with my name written across it in Mrs. Henderson's careful script. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, 3 pages long, written on her personal stationery, the cream-colored paper with her initials embossed at the top that she used for important correspondence. Dear Sarah, by the time you read this, graduation will be over, and you will have every right to hate me for what I said. I hope you will read this entire letter before you decide whether that hatred is justified. 6 weeks ago, I received a call from Jennifer Morrison's mother. She was concerned about the valedictorian selection process, questioning whether all students were being held to the same standards. She implied that your family's circumstances might have influenced the grading of your work. The teachers might have been more lenient with you out of sympathy rather than merit. I told her she was wrong. I told her your work spoke for itself, that your essays were the finest I had read in 23 years of teaching. But she persisted. She demanded that I review your portfolio, compare it side by side with Jennifer's work, prove that the selection was fair. So I did. Sarah, I spent 3 weeks going through every essay you had written for me, every test you had taken, every assignment you had submitted. I compared your work not just to Jennifer's, but to every student I had taught in the past 5 years. I was looking for evidence that Mrs. Morrison was right, that somehow your grades had been inflated by well-meaning teachers who wanted to help a deserving student overcome her circumstances. What I found instead was proof of something I had always suspected, but never fully appreciated. You are not just the best student in your class. You are one of the most gifted writers I have ever had the privilege to teach. Your essay on Gatsby wasn't just insightful, it was brilliant. Your analysis of the American dream through the lens of your own family's experience showed a depth of understanding that graduate students struggle to achieve. Your poetry portfolio revealed a voice that is both mature and authentic, capable of finding beauty in the most ordinary moments and truth in the most complex emotions. But Mrs. Morrison's accusations had planted a seed of doubt in my mind, and doubt is a poison that spreads quickly. I began to question my own judgment. Had I been too generous with you? Had my affection for your potential clouded my assessment of your actual achievement? The more I questioned myself, the more I resented the position I had been put in. I was angry at Mrs. Morrison for forcing me to doubt what I knew to be true. I was angry at the system that made your success seem suspicious simply because of who you are and where you come from. But mostly, I was angry at myself for allowing that doubt to take root. By graduation day, that anger had consumed me. When I stood at that podium and saw you sitting there, so proud and deserving, I was overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. Not the unfairness of your selection as valedictorian. That was the most fair thing that had happened in that auditorium in years. The unfairness was that your achievement had been questioned at all. That I had been forced to prove what should have been obvious to anyone who took the time to really look at your work. My words at graduation were not meant for you, Sarah. They were meant for Mrs. Morrison and everyone like her who believes that success must be stolen rather than earned when it comes to students like you. But I delivered them poorly, and in my anger, I hurt the one person who deserved only celebration. You do deserve this honor. You deserve it more than any student I have ever taught, not because of your circumstances, but in spite of them. You have earned every grade, every accolade, every opportunity that lies ahead of you. I hope someday you can forgive a foolish old woman who let her anger at injustice become an injustice itself. With deep regret and deeper respect, Margaret Henderson Sy have submitted a letter to the school board recommending that you receive the English department's highest honor for academic excellence. It is a recognition that should have been given years ago. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall of lockers until I was sitting on the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. The hallway around me seemed to spin, reality reshaping itself around this new information. Mrs. Henderson hadn't been disappointed in me. She had been defending me, fighting for me, even as her own anger had twisted her words into weapons that wounded the very person she was trying to protect. I thought about Jennifer Morrison, who had smiled at me for 6 years while her mother worked behind the scenes to undermine my achievements. I thought about all the times I had questioned my own worth, wondered if my success was real or imagined, earned or given. But mostly, I thought about Mrs. Henderson, standing at that podium with 23 years of teaching experience and a heart full of righteous anger, trying to defend a student she believed in, while simultaneously destroying the moment that student had worked so hard to reach. The irony was almost too painful to bear. In trying to protect me from those who would diminish my achievements, she had diminished them herself. In trying to defend my worth, she had made me question it. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. The hallway was still empty, still echoing with the ghosts of a school year that had ended in confusion and pain. But something had shifted. The weight I had been carrying for 3 days, the weight of undeserved honor and questionable achievement, had lifted, replaced by something else entirely, understanding, and with it, a different kind of sadness. I walked to Mrs. Henderson's classroom, knowing she would be there. She was always there during the summer, preparing for the next year, grading summer reading assignments, updating her bulletin boards with quotes from authors who understood that words had the power to heal or harm. The door was open, and I could see her sitting at her desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and books. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what had passed between us. When she saw me in the doorway, her face went pale. "Sarah," she whispered, "you found the letter." I stepped into the room that had been my sanctuary for 2 years, where I had discovered Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, where I had learned that my voice mattered, that my stories deserved to be told. The walls were covered with student work from years past, essays and poems that Mrs. Henderson had deemed worthy of display. 3 of them were mine. "I need to understand something," I said, settling into the desk I had occupied during my junior year. "Mrs. Morrison questioned my grades, and you defended me. But then you questioned them yourself." Mrs. Henderson removed her reading glasses and set them on her desk, her hands moving with the careful precision of someone trying to maintain control. "I let doubt poison what should have been pure celebration. I let someone else's prejudice make me doubt what I knew to be true about your abilities." "But why say those words at graduation? Why hurt me in front of everyone?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "Because I was angry," she said finally. "Angry at Mrs. Morrison, angry at the system, angry at myself for doubting you, even for a moment. And when I saw you sitting there, so proud and deserving, I wanted everyone to know that questioning your achievement was ridiculous. I wanted to make it clear that you belonged on that stage. But that's not what you said." "No," she admitted. "What I said was the opposite of what I meant. I was so focused on my anger at the injustice of having to prove your worth that I lost sight of what really mattered, protecting your moment of triumph." I pulled the letter from my backpack and placed it on the desk between us. You wrote that my essay on Gatsby was brilliant. It was. It is. I've shared it with colleagues at the university level. Sarah, they agree your analysis was sophisticated beyond your years, your writing elegant and insightful. You didn't just understand the text, you understood the world it reflected. Then why did you let Mrs. Morrison's words affect you? Mrs. Henderson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the empty football field where graduation had taken place. Because I'm human, she said simply. Because 23 years of teaching in a system that consistently undervalues students like you had made me tired. Because when someone demands proof of worthiness from students who have already proven themselves 100 times over, it makes you question everything. Including me. Including myself, she corrected. I questioned my own judgment, my own ability to recognize true talent, and in doing so, I betrayed both of us. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of summer maintenance work in the hallways. I thought about the past 3 days, about the doubt and shame I had carried, about the way Mrs. Henderson's words had made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I've been thinking about that night, I said finally, about what you said and how it felt to hear it. But I've also been thinking about why you said it. Mrs. Henderson turned from the window, hope flickering in her tired eyes. You were angry for me, not at me. You were angry that anyone would question whether I belonged on that stage. But your anger came out wrong, and it hurt me in the exact way you were trying to prevent. Yes, she whispered. That's exactly what happened. The weight of understanding settled between us like dust in afternoon sunlight. Through the windows, I could see the maintenance crew taking down the last remnants of graduation decorations, dismantling the stage where my moment of triumph had become my moment of deepest confusion. I need you to know something, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. For 3 days, I questioned everything. My grades, my writing, my right to the scholarship I received. I wondered if I was a fraud, if my success was charity disguised as merit. Mrs. Henderson's face crumpled with the weight of what her words had cost me. Sarah, I'm so sorry, but I also need you to know that your letter didn't just explain what happened. It reminded me of who I am. Not who others think I should be, or who they assume I am because of where I come from, but who I actually am. A writer, a thinker, a student who earned her place on that stage. I stood and walked to the bulletin board where my junior year essay about my grandmother's immigration story was still displayed, the red ink of Mrs. Henderson's comments visible in the margins. Powerful, she had written, authentic voice. This is the kind of writing that changes minds. Mrs. Morrison called you because she couldn't accept that I had beaten her daughter fairly, I said, tracing the words with my finger. She needed to believe that my success was somehow artificial, that the system had been rigged in my favor. Yes, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. She couldn't accept that Jennifer, despite her advantages, despite her private tutoring and test prep, had been outperformed by a girl whose parents worked night shifts to pay the bills, and you let her doubt poison you. I did. And in trying to defend you from her accusations, I ended up making them public in the worst possible way. I turned back to face her, seeing clearly for the first time the pain she had been carrying since graduation night. You know what the worst part is? It's not that you questioned my achievements, it's that you made me question them too. Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with tears. I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But here's what I've learned in the past 3 days, I continued, my voice steady now with newfound certainty. My worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it. It's not even determined by your recognition of it, as much as that has meant to me over the years. My worth is determined by the work I've done, the effort I've put in, the growth I've achieved. You're right, she whispered. You're absolutely right. I forgive you, I said simply, not because what you did was okay, but because I understand why you did it. And because holding on to anger would only give Mrs. Morrison and people like her more power over my story. Mrs. Henderson stood as well, tears flowing freely now. You are remarkable, Sarah, not just as a student, but as a person. Your capacity for forgiveness, for understanding, for rising above the smallness of others, that's what will take you far in life, not just your academic achievements. I have a favor to ask. I said, anything. Next year, when you have new students, new valedictorians, new young people whose achievements might be questioned, remember this moment. Remember that defending them means protecting their joy, not just their rights. Remember that the way you fight for them matters as much as the fact that you fight at all. She nodded, understanding passing between us like a promise. I will. I promise you, I will. And one more thing, I added. I want you to know that despite everything that happened, you're still the teacher who changed my life. You're the one who taught me that my voice mattered, that my stories deserved to be told. You're the one who encouraged me to apply for scholarships I thought were impossible. That doesn't change because of one terrible moment. Mrs. Henderson walked around her desk and embraced me. The first physical contact we'd had since that awful handshake on graduation night. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being better than I was. As we separated, I noticed something on her desk I hadn't seen before. A stack of college recommendation letters, each one carefully crafted to highlight a student's strengths and potential. On top was one with Jennifer Morrison's name. You're writing her recommendation for college? I asked. Mrs. Henderson followed my gaze and nodded. She's a good student, Sarah, not as gifted as you, but hardworking and dedicated. She doesn't deserve to be punished for her mother's actions. No, I agreed. She doesn't. In fact, Mrs. Henderson continued, I think Jennifer has been struggling with what happened to she came to see me yesterday, asking about you, wondering if she could somehow make things right. This surprised me. Jennifer and I had barely spoken since the incident, and when we did, our conversations were stilted and awkward. What did you tell her? I told her that making things right starts with understanding what went wrong, and that understanding requires honesty, especially with herself. I thought about Jennifer, the pressure she must have felt to live up to her mother's expectations, about the disappointment she must have experienced when she realized she wouldn't be valedictorian. It didn't excuse her mother's actions, but it helped me understand the context in which they had occurred. Mrs. Henderson, I said, I want you to know that I don't blame Jennifer for what her mother did, and I hope she doesn't blame herself either. You have a generous heart, Sarah. That's another gift that will serve you well in life. I picked up my backpack and headed toward the door, then paused. Mrs. Henderson, thank you for believing in me, even when you doubted yourself. Thank you for seeing my potential before I knew I had it. And thank you for teaching me that words have power, the power to wound, but also the power to heal. As I walked down the empty hallway for what I knew would be the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced since graduation night. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting what had happened, but the peace of understanding it, of choosing how to carry it forward. Mrs. Henderson's words at graduation would always be part of my story, but they would not be the end of it. I stopped at the trophy case, where my name would soon be engraved as valedictorian of the class of 2024. The plaque was already there, waiting for the engraver to add the final details. My name would join the list of students who had achieved this honor over the decades, a permanent record of academic excellence. But more than that, it would be a reminder that achievement is not diminished by others' doubts, that worth is not determined by others' recognition, and that sometimes the most important victories are the ones we win over our own insecurities and fears. I thought about Stanford, about the classes I would take and the professors I would meet, about the writing I would do and the stories I would tell. Mrs. Henderson had given me the tools to succeed in that environment, even if she had also given me a painful lesson in how those tools could be misused. As I pushed open the heavy doors of Lincoln High School for the last time, I carried with me not just the pain of graduation night, but also the wisdom that had grown from that pain. I carried the knowledge that I was strong enough to face doubt and emerge with my sense of self intact, that I was mature enough to forgive without forgetting, and that I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The summer sun was bright and warm on my face as I walked to my car. the manila envelope containing Mrs. Henderson's letter tucked safely in my backpack. It would go with me to Stanford, a reminder of where I had come from and what I had overcome. But more importantly, it would remind me of who I was. Sarah Elizabeth Chen, valedictorian scholarship recipient and survivor of the moment when words meant to defend became words that wounded. I had faced that moment and emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain of my own worth than ever before. And that, I realized, was perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. 2 months later, I received a package at my Stanford dorm room. Inside was a leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover, along with a note from Mrs. Henderson. For the stories only you can tell. I had been at college for 3 weeks, long enough to realize that my high school experience, both the triumph and the pain, had prepared me for this moment in ways I was only beginning to understand. The campus was everything I had dreamed it would be, sprawling lawns dotted with students reading under ancient oak trees. Libraries that smelled of old books and new possibilities. Professors who challenged me to think in ways I had never imagined. But perhaps the most unexpected part of my Stanford experience was my roommate, Jennifer Morrison. The irony wasn't lost on me. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor about justice and second chances. When I had received my housing assignment and seen her name listed as my roommate, my first instinct had been to request a change. But something had stopped me: curiosity, perhaps, or a desire to face this final piece of my high school story head-on. Jennifer and I had been polite to each other during orientation, carefully avoiding the elephant that had followed us from Lincoln High to this prestigious campus. We talked about classes and professors, about the dining hall food and the quirks of dorm life, but we danced around the real conversation that needed to happen. "I need to tell you something," she said one evening as we both sat at our desks, pretending to study while the tension between us grew thicker than the California fog rolling in from the bay. I looked up from my psychology textbook, waiting. My mother made that call to Mrs. Henderson about the valedictorian selection. Her voice was small, ashamed. "I didn't know she was going to do it. I didn't ask her to, but you didn't stop her either." "No," she admitted. "I didn't stop her. I was angry that you had beaten me, and I let that anger make me silent when I should have spoken up." I closed my textbook and turned to face her fully. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've been watching you these past few weeks. The way you approach your studies, the way you write, the way you think. And I realized that my mother was wrong. You didn't win because of sympathy or lowered standards. You won because you're better than me, better than all of us." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we should cross. "I'm not better than you, Jennifer. I'm just different. My experiences shaped my perspective in ways that made my writing distinctive. Your experiences shaped yours differently. Neither is better or worse there, just ours. But the way my family treated your achievement was wrong," I finished. "But it's not your burden to carry forever. What matters now is what we do with this second chance." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to make it right." "You don't have to make it right," I said gently. "You just have to make it different going forward." That night, I opened the journal Mrs. Henderson had sent and began to write. Not about the pain of graduation night, though that was part of the story. Not about the anger I had felt, though that too had its place. Instead, I wrote about understanding, about the complexity of human motivation, about the way pain and protection could become tangled until they were indistinguishable. I wrote about Mrs. Henderson, a teacher who had loved her students so fiercely that her love had momentarily blinded her to the harm her words could cause. I wrote about Jennifer's mother, a woman whose fear for her daughter's future had led her to try to diminish someone else's success. I wrote about my own journey, from shame to understanding, from questioning my worth to claiming it fully. But mostly, I wrote about the power of choosing how our stories end. The next morning, I found Jennifer reading at her desk, tears streaming down her face as she turned the pages of a book I recognized, Beloved, by Toni Morrison. It was the same book Mrs. Henderson had assigned to our AP English class, the one that had taught me that survival and healing were not the same thing. That true freedom came not from forgetting the past, but from choosing how to carry it forward. "She was right about you," Jennifer said without looking up. Mrs. Henderson, in her letter to the school board, she said you had the kind of mind that could change the world. I thought she was being dramatic. But reading your essay about this book, the one she shared with the English department, I understand now what she meant. I sat on my bed, watching my former rival grapple with truths that had taken me months to accept. "What are you going to do with that understanding?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But I know I can't go back to who I was before I knew it." Over the following weeks, Jennifer and I developed something I had never expected: a friendship. Not the easy camaraderie of people who had never hurt each other, but the deeper bond of two people who had faced their worst selves and chosen to be better. We studied together, ate meals together, talked late into the night about books and ideas, and the futures we were building for ourselves. Jennifer was intelligent and hardworking, qualities I had always known but had been overshadowed by the circumstances of our competition. Without the pressure of comparison, without the weight of her mother's expectations, she flourished in ways that surprised us both. One evening in October, as we sat in our room working on separate assignments, Jennifer looked up from her laptop and said, "I called my mother yesterday." I waited, sensing that this was important. I told her about us, about how we're roommates, about how we've become friends, about how wrong she was about you. How did she take it? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Not well." She said I was being naive, that you were probably just trying to get close to me for some advantage. She couldn't understand that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about everything. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. It couldn't be easy to realize that your parents' love had led them to act in ways that were harmful and unjust. "Don't be sorry," Jennifer replied. "Be proud. Because you've shown me what it looks like to rise above the worst parts of human nature. You've shown me what grace looks like." That afternoon, I called Mrs. Henderson. Her voice was warm with surprise and pleasure when she heard mine. "Sarah, how is Stanford? Are you settling in well?" "I'm learning," I said, "about literature, about psychology, about myself, but I'm also learning about forgiveness, and I wanted to thank you for that lesson." "You're thanking me for forgiveness? My dear, you taught me more about grace than I ever taught you about writing. Maybe we taught each other." There was a pause. "Comfortable now, where once there had been pain." "I have news," she said finally. "The school board approved my recommendation. You'll be receiving the English Department's award for academic excellence. It comes with a small scholarship for your sophomore year." "That's wonderful, but it's not why I called." "Oh, I called to tell you that I understand now what you were trying to do that night. And I want you to know that your words, both the ones that hurt and the ones that healed, made me stronger. They taught me that my worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it, but by my own knowledge of who I am and what I've earned. Sarah." Her voice was thick with emotion. "You have become exactly the kind of person I hoped you would be when I first read your writing. Strong, thoughtful, generous of spirit. Your parents should be so proud." "They are," I said. "And so am I." After I hung up, I returned to my journal and wrote one final entry about that chapter of my life. Today I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to carry our experiences as wisdom rather than wounds. Mrs. Henderson's words at graduation will always be part of my story, but they are not the story itself. They are simply one moment in a larger narrative about resilience, understanding, and the power of choosing grace over grievance. I am Sarah Elizabeth Chen. I am valedictorian of Lincoln High School's class of 24. I earned that honor through hard work, dedication, and the kind of writing that comes from a heart that has known both struggle and hope. No one can take that from me because it was never theirs to give. And that is how this story ends, not with bitterness or anger, but with the quiet satisfaction of a young woman who knows her worth and refuses to let others' doubts diminish it. I closed the journal and looked out my dorm room window at the California campus that would be my home for the next 4 years. Somewhere in the distance, other students were beginning their own stories, facing their own challenges, learning their own lessons about worth and recognition and the complicated nature of human motivation. Jennifer was at her desk, working on an essay for her American literature class. We had discovered that we both loved to write, though our styles were different. Hers, more analytical, mine, more emotional. Sometimes we shared our work with each other, offering feedback and encouragement. "Sarah," she said suddenly, looking up from her laptop, "I want you to read something I wrote. It's about that night. About graduation." She turned her screen toward me, and I read the opening lines of her essay. "The night of graduation, I learned that winning and succeeding are not the same thing. I learned that my mother's love for me had led her to try to diminish someone else's achievement. And I learned that the person who truly deserved to be valedictorian was sitting 3 rows ahead of me, wearing the same burgundy gown, carrying herself with a dignity I had never possessed. It's good," I said, meaning it. "It's honest. I'm thinking of submitting it to the campus literary magazine. Do you think I should?" I thought about it for a moment, about the courage it would take to make such a public admission, about the healing that could come from owning our mistakes and learning from them. "Yes," I said finally, "I think you should." That night, as I lay in my narrow dorm bed, listening to the sounds of college life filtering through our window, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment, from the pain of graduation night to the understanding that had grown from that pain, from the doubt that had nearly consumed me to the certainty that had emerged from facing that doubt head-on. Mrs. Henderson had been right about one thing. Words had power. The power to wound, but also the power to heal. The power to destroy, but also the power to rebuild. The power to end stories, but also the power to begin them anew. My story would continue, shaped by new experiences and new understanding. But this chapter, the chapter that began with words meant to wound and ended with words meant to heal, was complete, and I was ready for whatever came next. Carrying with me the knowledge that I was strong enough to face doubt and emerge with my sense of self intact. Wise enough to forgive without forgetting, and confident enough in my own worth to help others discover theirs. In the end, we are all the authors of our own recognition. And I had finally learned to write myself as the hero of my own story.